Welcome. This week for Module 6, we're going to be starting to look at sustainable development and human equity. We have already been looking at how the interconnectedness of social, economic, and environmental issues and how that leads to sustainable development. But now we're going to really pull that together, all the things that we've learned all term. And I think you're going to really enjoy this, seeing how it all just really comes together. If we're actually looking throughout the world, we're starting to see people, institutions, organizations all stepping up and realizing how interconnected all of these different issues are. With healthcare, for example, we really started to see that with the COVID epidemic, where we started to see different people being affected in different ways, and how important it was to look at the environments they were living in order to determine how to actually solve that problem as far as the individuals getting sick, as well as obviously the worldwide problem of a pandemic. So this is where we really started to look at all of these different things. I've mentioned over and over and over the UN Sustainable Development Goals, all those 17. But if you look at those 17, they're not just about sustaining the environment. Your text mentions a few, like goal number 6, which is clean water for all. That's not just an environmental issue. That's making sure we have clean water for humans. Goal 4, universal education and child protection. Goal 5, seeking gender equality. Last week, we even mentioned how women are creating more food than anyone else, yet we still have a lack of gender equality. And we also want to make sure that there's less inequalities in terms of gender, race, ethnicity. All of these are part of the Sustainable Development Goal because we realize the only way for us to have a sustainable world is to make sure that all people in that world have some level of equity and some level of access to all the things that they actually need. This is why it is so critical. But of course, we can't leave out the economic factor because we can't say everybody lose all of your money in an attempt to support a few. So that's why we need to look at an inclusive approach to look at all of these different things. Just looking at the news today, I pulled up a few articles and it's all different areas are looking at this. We see, if you just Google sustainable development and the news, you'll find the World Investment Organization is hosting a meeting in a few months that actually says, let's talk about investing sustainably in all these different countries and having equity of all people in order to sustain the financial world. The International Day of Peace has led sports teams to actually talk about the importance of sports and the importance of athletic competitions like the World Cup and such, and their importance in helping to find equity throughout the world. The UN, of course, is coming together to talk about those issues. I could scroll down and find more and more areas where we have different organizations throughout the world all coming together saying we need to find a sustainable world because we all need this world to live on. So we need to look at that impact of one to another. We also need to look into long-term solutions. Yes, some solutions do cost a bit to start going. If we're moving away from burning fossil fuels, there has to be an initial investment into solar power, into wind power, into these renewable energies. That's going to make a difference. But those new technologies are going to save everyone in the end. If everyone is using a renewable and cheaper energy source, then they're going to have to pay less, whether they're rich or poor, for that energy in the future. So that's where we're starting to look at economic viability and stability. For those of you who are saying, I just can't afford solar power, I know I personally have solar panels on my roof because where I live, they were put on for free. So I'm actually paying someone to use my roof to create energy. It's costing me a lot less money in the long run, and it's costing or giving them money, so we're all winning. I pay less for my energy resources. My energy resources are coming from a source that isn't affecting the environment, and some company who put them up there is making a lot of money off of my roof, which honestly I wasn't using anyway. This is where we need to find all these things working together. But we also need to start looking at our own consumption. I've asked you to think, looking at what you're doing, but now this week I'm really going to have you look at it. Look about how much water you use. Look at how much water you waste. How much food do you eat versus how much do you throw right in the garbage, or hopefully at least in the compost? How are you using your resources? Are you leaving lights on all the time and wasting energy that way? All of these are going to start making a difference, but it really comes down to you. What are you doing and what are you doing to make a difference? Now, we always hear, we talk about saving the world, we talk about reduce, reuse, recycle, and we look a lot at recycling here, and recycling is important and fantastic, and I hope you are recycling. But more important than recycling is not creating something disposable in the first place. So look at that loop of recycling is important, but also figuring out a way to not reuse or waste those resources is going to make a difference. Look at those patterns of consumption. A lot of people in more poor countries use reusable bottles rather than having plastic bottles they toss out all the time. And that's why richer areas tend to waste more because they have more that they feel they can waste. We need to encourage everyone to start moving in and saying, let's all make sure that we create less and less waste. We need to get to those goals. We need to work for the UN goals as well: no poverty, clean water, good work for everybody. Everyone needs to have these things, but we can all work together to make sure that everyone has what they need and we aren't reusing or reducing our chance of working in toward the future. Now, when we start talking about this again, look at what you're doing in your own life. And that's your assignment this week. So what we look at for our discussion board is how social development relates to our businesses and the environment. So again, we're tying those three things in again. Make sure in your discussion comments, I see that you're talking about all three pillars. I want to hear you talking about social equity, business, as well as the environment and how they all tie together. But I also want to hear about you and what you're doing. See if you've changed some things in starting to take this course. So your journal this week is actually supposed to be a video, but if you really feel uncomfortable with doing a video, you can write it down as well. Video is probably easier though. And I want to hear about your consumption. So you might need to write some things down before you sit down to record your video. Write down what your consumption is so you can get a good idea. How much are you putting in the wastebasket? How much are you putting in the compost? How much are you bringing into your house? If you start looking at it, a lot of people bring like food in from the grocery store, and immediately 50% of that turns into waste because it is the plastics, it's the bag. Let's figure out a way to make sure that there is more of a balance of those. Pay attention to your water use. Are you taking 20-minute showers? Are you leaving the water on while brushing your teeth? Are you reusing water perhaps? For instance, I use gray water, use the cat's water dish. When they're not drinking it because the water always has to be changed for them, I take that and I dump it into the plants. Why throw out good water? Just because it's not good enough for my cat doesn't mean it's not good enough for something else. So look into all of those different things. I really want to see you and see what you're doing. And then we're going to be moving on. Also, make sure you take a look at the project for next week. Next week is your big projects due. So make sure you review that because that is due. The term is coming up to an end really fast. I look forward to seeing what you guys have to offer this week.